Good evening. This is Patsy Brescia opening the January 18th meeting of the Norwalk Charter Revision Commission. I'll start out by taking roll call. Mr. McQuaid.
Here.
Mr. Witherspoon. Anita Watford. Here. Carl Dickens.
Here.
Angela Wasuna is not present.
She's in Davos.
Oh, how nice. And Tyler Fairbrain. Here. We have a quorum, and so we will commence the meeting. The first order of business is obviously the minutes of the January 4th meeting. And there are several typos throughout these minutes and mistakes of spelling of some of our commissioners. So perhaps we table these for the corrections to be made and reviewed by our recording people.
I'd make a motion you table until the corrections are made.
Thank you. Is there a second to that motion?
Thank you.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay. We have called to order and we're ready to start the review of the capital and operating budget discussions. So will council lead us to that?
You want me to go through the article again?
We have a fourth revision, correct?
Yes,
Okay,
which is the one, which was the result of last meeting. And I'll put it up on the screen if I can. Can I share? Am I able to share the screen?
that would be great. Yes, please.
All right, let's make sure I'm putting the right thing up. I hope this is the right one. Can you tell me whether you see Article 10?
Article 10 with a lot of red.
Yeah, we
Good.
need to make it a little bigger though, right?
Bigger. I'll make
Please.
it bigger, yeah. Layout. Review. View. Okay, there we go. Larger. Zoom. We'll go up to 200. Is that better?
Perfect.
Yes.
Oh, it's for me. It's
Yeah,
better.
that's great.
All right. So, and I thought, are you going to have somebody as Council Member Camacho going to be here, Madam Chair?
Yes,
Right. So basically, these reflect the changes that have been made, including the changes, minor changes made at the last meeting. There are no significant changes that have come in since the CFO wanted to meet with the administration. The chief of staff, I think, just returned yesterday from a long trip abroad. The mayor was out last week. So I think they're going to try to meet in the next few days to give me further comments so that at our next meeting, we will have a more complete version of this document. But again, section 10-1 is the kind of the overview, the cooperation clause. We define the operating budget and the capital budget. Those are defined right up front. And we have the fiscal year defined in here. And then
Steve, can you roll back down just a moment for the section B there?
yeah,
Because I made a note on the hard copy from last week. I just want to see. Yeah, you were going to several taxing districts or something. You were going to remove that, or is that done?
it should be done.
Except where the fiscal year of said city and said several taxing districts.
Well, it just says the said city, the city, we took that out earlier.
Took this, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
I
gone,
just-
that was not a change because it was changed already.
Okay,
Yeah, and it's the city, the said is gone.
okay.
I had
I
the
was-
same one, Carl.
Yeah,
Okay.
and
So I have a general comment throughout, in in A. When we say, the council, the common council, the Board of Investment and Taxation, and we go on to, all departments. And I would imagine we want to really say departments, commissions, and agencies, which, boards and agencies throughout the whole document.
no,
Because
no,
it's
we're gonna,
someplace, it is in some places and not in
yeah,
others.
we're gonna have common definitions. The departments provide the budgets, and departments will include agencies and bureaus and other subdivisions in a defined term, as you will see in Article 1, 2, and 3. We're beginning to develop the definition, so there will be a common definition. But I don't think, other than the Board of Education, the Planning and Zoning Commission, that that you have, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you have boards and commissions that provide independent budgets to the city. They really come from the departments, as I understand it.
Okay, they submit them to a department. Well, we need to check on that.
Yeah,
Okay.
this has
But-
been reviewed very carefully by the CFO. So, but we will check that, make
Okay.
sure that's correct.
Mhm. Thank you.
All right, and then we go down to subsection C, where we have, capitalized capital budgets, a defined term, and the operating budget for public inspection, that we encourage public engagement. The assertion of authority for the common council possesses the legislative authority to enact ordinances. Looks like there's a typo in there. Let me just fix that. Let me just fix that in my it's amazing, you keep finding these
Yeah.
possesses.
Each time,
Possesses.
yeah.
Possesses and then we again, this is, the chair asked for this, and we have clarified and streamlined throughout the document, where we call it the annual operating budget. It's the operating budget, so that term is used consistently throughout the document. We added the term Norwalk Public Schools as opposed to the public schools, and because it's a commonly understood term. In some communities, I call it the Board of Education and the Department of Education, but I think that your parlance is Norwalk Public Schools, and that will be, I think, more clearly understood within the city. The subsection B talks about the submission of the operating budget, departmental estimates, and including the public schools. The Norwalk Public Schools is the significant change, the date. That's a hard underscore, because I just wanted to make sure we kept looking at these dates until we're done, and that the dates actually work all the way through. And I've asked the CFO to do that. In subsection 5, I think this was the chair's request. I think it's a sensible request. We eliminate what could be troublesome political language, although all those terms are included in personnel expenditures. So we just don't shout it out. They are included there. So we deleted including salaries, benefits, and overtime. That is deleted from the draft.
Where exactly are you?
You're at B5,
Subsection 5, it's
B5.
B5.
P5.
You see the strike through?
On the bottom.
I'm highlight. You see the highlight? Do you see me? Can you see
Yeah.
that?
Yes,
That language, we're deleting that.
okay.
I believe that was your
Well,
request.
my suggestion was to leave it at including salaries and benefits, period. That was my suggestion, intended suggestion.
Oh. Well, whatever you'd like. I mean, if we want to leave those,
Yeah,
I just want to make sure that overtime is not construed not to be part of that. I mean, that's why I took all three out, because they're all included in personnel expenditures. So I'll leave it to your call, but the most important element of that is overtime. I understand the reasons why you don't want to specify it in the charter, so that's why.
well, let's have, you have Tyler?
Under personnel expenditures.
Yeah, they would
I think we
be.
could probably, it seems redundant to say personnel expenditures and then include.
Yeah,
Okay,
Yeah.
personnel.
Yeah, I agree.
Alright.
I think we should take that out of there.
all right. Sorry, I thought that's what we were trying to do
That's
anyhow.
okay.
Steve, I apologize for interrupting. This is Jordan. I'm seeing that Ed Camacho's writing that he's on and he can't be seen. So I don't know if Shafiq, if you can help move him to a panelist, because he's on as an attendee. So I think that's why he can't be seen or heard on our screen. So if there's any
Great,
way,
yeah, it's really.
Can Patsy
Have
do
him
that? I'm not a host, I don't think.
You'll have a tech will have to help me do that.
yeah.
Can you do it?
Or can you send him a new invite that makes him an attendee, not?
Mr. Camacho, can you see us and hear us?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
thank
There we
you
go.
so much
Okay.
for
There he is.
joining us.
All right,
And-
thank you.
and please feel free to jump in with anything here because of your expertise, all the years on the Board of Estimate and Taxation, and now congratulations at moving to the Common Council.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think I'm a glutton for punishment, but that's how it goes.
It
Sure,
seems
yeah.
like you're a glutton for punishment.
Or
You go from one to the other.
condolences is the other option. right?
Condolences, Ed.
Okay.
One to the other, yeah. Any comments so far for anything we've discussed before you were?
No, I thought
Okay.
excluding, if you're going to exclude the overtime, you might as well exclude everything else because
Okay,
it's
perfect, all
sort of
right,
all.
okay.
All right, so I'll move on. The
But up in number 4, should conservation and development be capitalized? I noticed throughout there are a few
we
different,
haven't defined the term. I mean, we could capitalize the plan of conservation and development. It's not a defined term, but we could if you like.
I think it might be helpful because it's relatively new. You know, it's not an ancient reference
All right.
and difference to the city planning documents.
All right, I'll capitalize it.
Okay. Okay, so now,
I'm not making the changes on this document. This is a red line. I'm
Yeah.
tracking it on a hard document in my office. you know, so.
okay, thank you. Okay, so
Then this is the submission by the 15th of December. These terms, you will see when we get to Article 1, these terms have been moved into Article 2, actually, where we're going to have all of our definitions. I was holding them here, but we've now moved them into the Article 2, which you'll see later this evening. These terms were carefully reviewed with the CFO. If Councilman Camacho has any thoughts on the terms, even though they're crossed out, we'd be happy to take them, but we will see them a little later when we get to the Articles 1, 2, and 3.
they've just been moved. They haven't been rewritten.
Not rewritten. I took them
Right.
exactly
have
as
one.
we had discussed them.
Yeah, Ed?
Yeah, I do have one comment about, you were discussing boards and commissions, whether or not they're entities that submit budgets to the BET. I'd have to go look back. I'd have to go back and look at my budget book, but I think that, for instance, you have the Fair Housing Commission, they submit a budget.
The Oak Hills Authority, what about
Yeah,
them?
Hills Authority. Well, they don't submit a budget that we necessarily approve. I think we just oversee it, but I don't know that we have any. Well, I guess perhaps we may approve it, although we always have, so it's just, it goes without saying, because they're sort of independent, but I know that the Fair Housing Commission is a commission and they do submit a budget. But I'd have to go back and look at the budget book. So we should put a pin in that and go back and look at the budget book and see how it's laid out, because I think that there's a section for agencies and commissions and boards and stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Right,
thought there was.
I've made a note in article in 10-1A to consider adding and boards and commissions to that. And departments will be a defined term that will include agencies, probably authorities as well, to the extent that authorities are submitting budgets, just to make sure that we're not using 3 or 4 different terms. A lot of charters end up with multiple terms. I try to simplify it and have one defined term, and you can look back at the definition to see if you're included in it. And so the objective is to include all those entities in those terms. All right, so then we get to the mayor's proposed operating budget. And we have clearly, I don't know if the mayor's opined yet on this, but it was a general consensus that this is the mayor's proposal. It was kind of ambiguous the way it had been dealt with before. It almost sounded like it was a joint proposal by the mayor and the CFO. And you'll see there's a few changes in here that makes it clear that this is coming from the mayor. That is kind of a standard approach throughout the state. Norwalk has a very unique budget system, as the council member Camacho will probably knows better than any of us, because the council plays a lesser role than most legislative bodies do. The Board of Estimate and Taxation plays a stronger role, and the mayor has the role of the chief executive. But the budget that gets submitted ultimately to the BET and the Common Council will be called the mayor's proposed operating budget. Instead of the term criticisms in A, I based on my conversations, I think we talked about this last week, we're going to talk about it narrative and recommendations. The mayor is not going to criticize his own budget. I think the theory in the past was this was the departments that were putting this together, and the mayor's criticisms, I think, were, well, I don't think this department should get that. They should get this. The way we're going to set it up is it's going to be an affirmative obligation. The mayor will set the narrative. This is his proposed budget. This is why I believe these provisions should remain in the budget, which is more of a statement to the BET than it is to the council, because the council just looks at the cap. And so that's why the terminology has changed. So I just wanted to explain that.
Yeah, I think it's a much more sensitive word.
Yeah.
And appropriate.
Thank you.
Any comments from anybody? None. Okay, now we're on B.
No real changes there. I took the set out.
The
Oh,
only
I'm-
thing there is, again, we're saying the department estimates, and if there are in fact other agencies or groups that give estimates, we need to change that somehow to reflect that information.
All right, I'll put a hold on the board and
Yeah.
commission thing. Got it.
For consistency, yeah.
Good catch. Thank you, Madam Chair. Review by the Board of Estimate and Taxation. No changes here, except we're eliminating ancient words, legalese, legalese, the said terminology. We want to try to make this read in a more sensible way. Again, the same thing is true in the power to levy taxes. I have this last language. I don't know why it's in yellow. I think, I think that every tax laid by the board shall be laid upon the assessment list of the city last completed. I think the term is every tax laid shall be laid. And I'm going to look at language and see if I can give language so that, I mean, I know what it says because I've been dealing with these things for 30 or 40 years. But I wanted to read, and I think we wanted to read, so the public understands what that means.
So it could be
so-
like based, shall be based on the assessment.
Something like that. I think that's
Yeah.
right. And so that's why I had it yellowed, because we want to try to put it in simple English that says exactly what we wanted to say.
I've got a quick observation. At some point in the proposed draft, there's rather than the Board of Estimate, there's a change to add the Board of Estimate and taxation. But then at other places, it simply refers to the board.
Yeah.
And I know that the board means the Board of Estimate and taxation, but it seems if you're going to say the Board of Estimate and taxation as opposed to simply the Board of Estimate, then to shorten it even more and just say the board. And I realize it becomes a little cumbersome because you're going to be saying it all over the place, but you know.
Yeah, I think it's a good catch. Let's try to catch them as we're going through, if
Yeah,
that's okay.
there's quite a few like that throughout, and I think that's the consistency, because sometimes it says the council, it doesn't say common council. And I think it just should be the same all the way through.
Well, we define it in the beginning as
I
common
know,
council.
I know you do, but then sometimes it says common council and sometimes it just says council.
Well,
So
because it's defined that way. I mean,
Yeah, it
so
is-
let me
I
give you an
know, but
example
we're
in
trying to
B.
make it easy for people to
Right.
understand.
Let me explain
Yeah.
something. In
Okay.
B, do we want, so we open it up at the Board of Estimate and Taxation. In that last sentence, we just refer to the board. Since the Board of Estimate and Taxation is referenced in the first sentence, do we need to reference it fully in the last sentence? I don't think grammatically
don't.
we need
Yeah.
to.
If we're
I don't
gonna
think we
define-
need to.
Yeah, if we're going to define the Board of the Board of Estimate and Taxation as the board, then the point
right.
is just consistent throughout. You just have to be the board throughout, as opposed to have it.
All right, so why don't I,
And let me comment on that too, because I think one of our goals is to make it not only easy to read, but for the average person to understand. And so then when they say the word board, if they're not really astute with all this, they have to go back for a reference. So why not just be consistent throughout the document that we always have the Board of Estimate and Taxation, the Board of Education and the schools, etc., a common council, because having it one place one way and another becomes confusing to people who are just picking up the document for the first few times. And that's one of our goals here.
so you want in B, you want to refer in the last sentence to the Board of Estimate and
Yes.
Taxation again,
Yes.
even though in
Yes,
this very paragraph,
I think
grammatically,
that's beneficial. That's my opinion.
what does everybody else think? This,
I mean, my suggestion, Patsy, is that that would be a good thing, but I think also we want to cut down on, on wording, on length, on volume, as much as possible. And if this section has to do with finances, and we're referring to the Board of Estimate and Taxation throughout this section, as opposed to the Board of Ed through some other section, then I think that one school of thought would be just to simplify it and just use the board throughout rather than the Board of Estimate and Taxation, because you're just adding more language, more words to to a document. And I know that it may not be as clear for a lay person, but I think if it's consistent throughout the document, that the definitions are at the very beginning, of each section.
Yeah, I understand all that. I just have a different opinion. That's all. So it's not a big deal. but-
About,
I thought the compromise position would be that if you reference the Board of Estimate and Taxation at the beginning of a paragraph, then you refer to the board again. It's cumbersome to call it the Board of Estimate and Taxation again. So the compromise I would recommend is that every time even if the previous paragraph has the Board of Estimate and Taxation, the next paragraph should also start with the Board of Estimate and Taxation. If you refer to it again within the paragraph, it's simply the board. Does that make sense?
Are there
I like
other
that.
commissioners?
yes,
Yeah,
How
Yeah,
about-
Tyler, you're,
I agree with that. I think that makes sense. If you are, I don't know, there's a need to. expand on it in the same paragraph, but I like that idea that if you're starting a new paragraph and you're referencing it the first time, you know, then you can shorten it throughout.
Okay. And then you,
Yeah, I think that's okay too, as long as you start,
You start with it, so
Start
you,
with it so
you
that people
refresh your
know.
memory there.
okay, so in the same paragraph, we have the council referring to the common council, and that's not preference in the beginning. So again, that's something I picked up throughout the whole document. So that I would like to see the word common in front of council, so.
No big deal. I'll take care of that. Common council throughout. Okay, got it. All right, let me go back to where we were.
Okay, so now we're on 10.5.
Yep, we get back down there. 10.5. This is simply the
The timing.
yeah, the timing, and the term published will be defined in the published doesn't mean a newspaper. It means however, there could be an ordinance that defines it. It could be defined by rule. But published would be in accordance with the notice provisions that are set forth in the in Article 2.
can I ask a question about this ordinance business? Is that defined anywhere else? What is an ordinance? How,
An ordinance is, and it will be defined in Article 2. An ordinance is your law. You have the charter, which is your constitution, just to, do it in to define it in a way that we all understand. And the ordinances are your statutes. The statutes are your laws of the state or the feds. Ordinances are the laws of the city.
okay, as long as it's defined someplace, because it's used quite a bit.
Oh, yeah, no, it's a defined term in the Article 2, which I
Okay.
handed out the end of last week or early this week. All right, so, and then these terms, meeting and meeting notice, are all moved. I don't know why they haven't been, I didn't delete them, I didn't take them out. They're all moved to Article 2. Public notice, as you see. We made the change. Right now, there's a requirement for publication in a newspaper of general circulation distributed in the city. That has become very expensive. If it's required by law, you have to do it. If you determine you want to do it, you can do it, but it shouldn't be mandatory that you do it. That's the way I've been writing them for other municipalities.
Are there any commissioners want to comment on that concept? Okay, I hear none. We can move on.
So 10-6 is the cap section, the maximum limit section. And here it's the common council. Now, again, let's look at A. And do we want to follow the same pattern, or do you want me to say the common council every time I reference it? Because again, we refer to it in the first sentence, then we refer to it as the council.
Yeah, I think that's what we just talked about, right? So you,
Right.
have, you open it with it, and then when you get to the, whatever is the fourth line, and it just says council, that's fine, because you've already
All right.
called it out in the first sentence.
Yeah, and as you'll see in this paragraph, at the very last sentence, we referred to the Board of Estimate and Taxation because that's the first time it's
Yep.
referred to
Right.
in this. So that's kind of the approach that's taken. Subsection B, I think I've mentioned to you, at some point when I'm done with this article, I'm going to take all the exemption provisions and put them up in the front of the section. Right now, you have several exemptions. This subsection B is your referendum provision. I don't know how often you've had a referendum in Norwalk on the budget, but you have referendum provisions, and there are exemptions throughout the budget process that make it clear that the cap is not subject to referendum. There's another thing that the Board of Estimate does that's not subject to referendum. I'm going to simply combine those at the opening, in that opening section, once I know that we're pretty much locked into a process. So it's just defined once, and it will say 10-6 is not is exempt from the referendum process, and whatever 10- whatever the next section is, we'll get to it in a minute, are deferred. So that section will probably go away at some point. and be merged in an earlier portion of the document.
I don't think we have had one in many years, but Ed, are you familiar with any?
I'm not,
No,
not-
in 50 years, I don't recall anybody, but.
Yeah, it's amazing. The larger cities have retained these referenda, but they have not, from the old town meeting form of government, basically. And this is probably from your town form of government before the merger of the town and the city.
that kind of raises a point. I'm not sure if this is a good time to ask the question, but Madam Chair, if I can, it's about this notion of a referendum as it relates to the charter. But we can perhaps I can ask you in private or
No,
later
Madam Chair, I'm happy to answer it if we won't have the benefit of the councilman's presence at most of our meetings. Do you mind if he asks the question right now?
It's his call whether he wants to wait or not. And you just,
Yeah, well, it's just a very quick question about this process in general. I was wondering, is there going to be a provision, or have you guys considered adding a provision that allows for an amendment of this charter by a 2/3 vote of the Common Council to be then voted on by the electorate without having to form a charter commission every single time?
There's no authority for that. The only under state law, it's governed exclusively by Title VII. The only authority for a non-commission charter revision happens to be in this section. You can change the schedule of the budget. You can amend your charter through the legislative process to alter the budget process, to alter the dates and timing of the budget process. You can actually amend your charter. That's the only exception to the rule on charter revision. Otherwise, you have to have a commission or you have to have a petition. But for purposes of the budget, and I've said this to a number of communities, let's work our way through this, but understand you have a remedy. It was actually Speaker Ritter got it through the legislature in 2018 that allows for a legislative alteration of the charter without having to go through a full charter process
Okay,
related to the budget only.
great, thank you.
Okay.
okay,
Again, C is just language that has not been changed. 10-7. There are no changes in that section. This relates to the BET deliberations. The change is the reference to the operating budget.
I did have a question about that,
All right.
and that's really the only other thing. So basically, in 10-7, the main paragraph, basically the Board of Estimate then meets with. They have a public hearing with respect to any possible alterations of the budget. Then the budget is transmitted to the Common Council.
Yes.
And then the Common Council can, by a 2/3 vote, presumably increase or decrease the cap, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, it's the current rule.
If they
Yeah.
decrease the cap, then the next 10-9A, then the Board of Estimate is left with fixing a tax rates based on the decreased cap. But the decreased cap presumably could underfund all the departments as the budget, as the BET had initially anticipated. So in other words, the cap is set. The Board of Estimate meets with the department heads. They agree to basically either stay within the cap or to go over the cap. But if it then goes back to the Common Council, and the Common Council decides to go under their original cap, then the next thing that the Board of Estimate can do, the only thing it can do is to set the tax rates, or at least to fix it.
No, look at 10-9A. It says to make such alterations in the operating budget, including the tax rates as necessary to comply with the limit.
I
So you-
see. Okay,
So you can make those
Yeah.
alterations,
yeah, got you. Okay, thank you.
all right? And again, we follow the pattern, although I'll tell you, in B, we don't. We should put the Board of Estimate,
Yeah,
And
and C
taxation.
as well.
yeah, yeah,
And C as well, yeah.
in B, yeah.
And C.
And C, okay. All right, I'll fix those.
And E.
Yeah, we'll get to it. Yeah, so and these are the final alterations. Again, Ed, we're not, or Councilman, we're not changing any of the process at all. We've changed some terminology, but what we're trying to do, the philosophy is we're trying to clean up the document, create a document that is readable. If a year from now you want to change structures, the council wants more power, the mayor wants more power, the Board of Estimate wants more power. We'll come back with a clean document and then you can debate those things at that point. I think the real goal this year is to really try to just fix what we've got, keep it moving and define it so everything is clear in this process. I would say, yeah, and C, we have to do Board of Estimate, and D, Common Council. I mean, I have it in the title, but I think I'll put Common Council in the body as well. So we're consistent in that regard.
E2. Also,
Got it. Thank you.
And you have to add Board of Estimate there.
Yep, that's what I'm doing.
Okay,
Thank you, Commissioner.
Hey, this is Tom Livingston, just if I can.
oh, hi, Tom, welcome.
No, I've been listening for a while, and so
Oh.
I apologize. I have to go back and forth to another meeting. I just note above, you talk about the council of the city. I think you, if you're going to do this stuff, I think you delete of the city.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. All right, that's old language I did not take out. Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, this is my 2 cents jumping in here.
No, that's good. As I keep saying to Commissioner Wazuna, who is a diva, is abroad. Actually, I thought she should have broadcast this meeting
From there.
at the conference just to show people how American democracy actually works. I think it would have been a real thing. So good. I'll take that out, Tom. Thank you. All right, so no further action by the Common Council. Again,
So
these are all the current
where-
procedures.
Where are you now?
I'm in E, where we'll say the Board of Estimate and Taxation. We got that. And now we're in 1010, appropriation shall not exceed estimate of revenues. That's current language. No changes there. 1011, again, no changes. Now, if you see that, you can't see the notes in this section, but this is where we kind of left things off with the CFO last week. I've raised a number of questions and Councilman Camacho might have some insights on this. I want to make sure that the charter addresses all the relevant issues because A, B, and C, which is the limits on expenditures, special appropriations, exemption from the maximum limit, special appropriations and special purpose appropriations. I want everybody to, because it wasn't clear what those things are. I think we need to clarify what those three categories are, because I read them as some of these things sound like transfers to me. What in the common parlance, in a non-appropriation sense, when you're transferring money outside of the appropriation process. And I just want to make sure that we've covered intra and interdepartmental transfers, and that we make that process absolutely clear. So that's one of the issues that the CFO is going to be talking to Tom, Greg, the mayor's office about, to try to make sure the 1011 is set up in a way that is really understandable. I have a pretty good feel for budgets, and I find these three sections very dense. Maybe Councilman Camacho has some thoughts on it. Maybe I'm missing something in it, but I think these sections need some reworking and I've asked the CFO to do some homework on that with the administration.
Yeah, I didn't review this, the rest of the document from here on as carefully, but I will. But certainly, I do know that the transfer is certainly within the same department transfer. $5,000 or more require BET approval. That is clear. I'm not sure if it's clear from the language from either A, B, or C, but I don't know about transfers from one department to another. I don't know.
Yeah. I think,
I mean,
the charter needs to clearly delineate those things and that's why I was concerned about these sections. And I want to see what your I've asked the CFO to lay out what the processes are. If he can do that for me, then I can take a hand at trying to fix the language. I'm not asking him to give me the legalese for it, but give me the process that everybody agrees on as the process. And I think 1011 should be the section that addresses those issues. That's why there's a very extensive footnote over on the side that we can't see because we've enlarged. It's on your copies, but you can't see it on the screen right now.
That's very important. So you're going to talk to Henry and whom else?
Yeah, we're
Well-
going, excuse me, we're setting up a meeting with Henry and Leisha, and I was going to invite Ed and Greg to walk through this line by line to make sure it really conforms to what's actually happening.
Okay. And so also in A again, in front of council, do we need common council?
Yeah, we will. When
Okay, okay.
And I just want, if I can just note one more thing here, it talks about a 2/3 vote taken by yays and nays. I would just suggest as we go through this, and we won't have to mention it each time, is that that's a little archaic to say you have yays and nays. So I think it can be simplified.
Yes and no.
Well, that's
I think-
2/3 vote.
I think 2/3 vote, that's it.
2/3 vote says it. And
Yeah.
it's going to be a defined term upfront, majority vote of the common council. And so we'll define what a vote is and how that works. So I agree the yays and nays will come out. I apologize for not picking that up earlier.
That's right. And you have the other city here, which you'll get as you go through the document, other places too. Council of the city.
All right, we'll fix that. Let me do council of the city. Do a search and destroy,
Well,
or search and replace, I'm sorry. Or search and destroy, actually, get rid of it, yeah.
Get rid of the council.
Search and delete, okay. So that's 1011 is gonna be subject to a rewrite based on what comes out of the summit meeting that they're gonna have with the mayor's office, the council and the mayor and the BET folks. Now, the capital budget, we kind of, I believe that that was also going to be discussed at that meeting. Tom, if I'm not.
That's
mistaken.
correct. That's
Yeah.
correct.
So that's where we kind of left things with the CFO at our last meeting. I will make the changes, Madam Chair, that we've agreed on, how to refer to the council and how to refer to those, and we should fix the 5-year plan. Make sure it says 5, there we go. And other little things like that, but I will wait till we get a report. And what I would hope to have for you for the next meeting is a document that reflects the outcome of that discussion. Is that, if that's all right with you, Madam Chair, that the next
Yeah,
document
okay.
will show the outcome of the what I'm calling the summit meeting, where the folks come together and figure these last few things out for us.
Okay, so in 1011C, the last few words of capital projects program, should that be capitalized?
Which section? 10-
C, the last 3 words, capital projects program, the end of the sentence. It seems that should be capitalized.
1012C.
No, I see it. I see it. Let me just see something here. Let's see our defined term. Hold on.
We have to find it someplace, I think, previous.
No,
Yeah.
It's the program of capital expenditures is what we're calling it. That was not my favorite term, but it is the capital projects. I would prefer to call it the capital project program as a defined term, as opposed to the program of capital expenditures, but the CFO was pushing for having the 5-year program of capital expenditures as the title. I think personally, from a simplification perspective, I think calling it the capital project program, I would agree with the chair, as a capitalized defined term makes sense. But I'll leave that up to you. I'll cap it there, Madam Chair, and see, but it's not, it's referred to within the definition of the 5-year program of capital expenditures. So Tom, if you, in that group, if I'm not in that meeting, can have a discussion about what we're going to call the 5-year program of capital expenditures, I think we should come up with a pithier term to define it. And the 5-year elements of it will be within the definition, but you don't need to say 5-year program every
Right, I
time
agree.
you do it. So I will cap it on the assumption that we'll move in that direction.
Yep.
Is that okay, Madam Chair?
Yeah, and then the question is, how definitive is that, or how structured is it? In other words, can it be changed easily? I don't recall reading anything to that effect. It's established. I think we need to define it a little more in more detail. I can't pick out the exact spot where it is first referenced.
Oh, the definition is in that section. Remember the cross-out section we talked about earlier?
Oh,
It's here, I'll go back. Hold on.
Okay.
Let me go up on the screen.
oh. I remember
It's
Here it
first,
is.
Yeah,
Here it is, the 5-year program of capital expenditures. It's a 5-year program to which consideration shall be given by the agencies, and I don't like that word, and that responsibility is vested, and in the manner prescribed by this charter shall constitute and be known as the capital projects program. So
program.
we're defining a term and then redefining it within the definition.
Yeah,
That's what I was not thrilled about.
well, okay, and I'm concerned about that being.
Yeah, no, I agree. You and I are on the same.
Okay,
We'll talk about that at the meeting, at the summit meeting, so to
Mhm.
speak.
okay. Ed and Tom, any comments on that?
No, I think that I like the capital projects program. And if we're going to define it, it should be capitalized.
All right, so where are we here? Let me go back to where we were. Okay,
10:13, are we? Chief Financial Officer's report. Is that what we're doing?
I think that's it. Yeah. And again, this section, and I will fix it in the way that I think that in this chapter, in this section, it's done right. BET, Common Council. No other changes, but again, keep in mind that this is the section that they're going to be looking at. But there are no substantive changes in my draft because we kind of stopped at this point.
Okay,
And then 10-14 similarly. And again, the terms are properly laid out in A. And we do define it, Madam Chair, we do cap plan of conservation and development here.
yeah,
So you picked up on that in the
Yeah.
other one. That's
Yeah.
a good catch. And again, no changes because they're going to look at the stuff. Again, this simply, now again, Tom, am I supposed to take out the master plan again? We have a reference to the master plan. I thought we were,
Yeah, I thought we were going to replace that with the P O C D.
yeah, that's what I thought so too. I just want to make sure. Yeah, I took it out in one place. Let's see here.
it's in C, it's still there in C.
Yeah, I see it. I see it. Report of. I'm trying to find it in my
Well,
document.
in your search and change,
10-14, 10-14C.
in that feature, your search and change,
Yep,
you might just hit that.
I got it. No, I'm working with a hard copy, so I have to look
Yeah.
at it with my eyeballs and figure it out. I got it. I fixed it. So this will be changed right here. And then the mayor gets to review it. And again, we'll capitalize it if that's the defined term. And again, we did change the master plan here. It's the city's plan for conservation development. And reference the mayor's proposed capital budget.
You are,
10-15, I'm sorry. There you go.
okay, on 10-11C. The third line, it said, if money is unexpended, shall be covered back into the treasury 30 days after the expiration of fiscal year.
What section?
The word covered,
It's 11C.
11C, the third line,
Oh, I see.
if unexpended, the money shall be covered back into, that seems wrong or archaic. or-
Really means return, right?
Yeah, I would think, returned.
Or reality, because it really is always in the treasury, so I'm not sure that it needs to be returned either, because it's really always there.
Shall be what?
It's just,
Returned?
Why don't we, again, we're gonna be discussing the capital budget. And this is one of the sections that's gonna be, I have this highlighted now. So that when they meet, we will discuss what covered back means. What does this mean? Does anybody do it? Does anybody know what it means?
Yeah.
Or is it a mistake? I mean, I've never heard
It's
that term.
It's not something I changed. I pulled it out of your charter.
Yeah,
So it's in
yeah,
your-
no, I know.
It's in your current charter. Could be a-
I
yeah.
wrote on my notes archaic, so.
Yeah, Patsy, I agree with you.
Yeah,
Okay,
we'll fix it. We'll fix that.
whatever it is, we need a better word for it.
Got it.
Okay,
I have the note.
you agree?
I do, and while we were back in that section, I had a note, I think we might have already discussed it, but at the end of 11B, there's another yays and nays that
Oh, yeah.
come out.
Yeah, I'll take all those out. I caught that one.
Okay, so now we're on 10-12.
10,
10:15.
10:15.
Okay, then.
Well, I'll go back if it sounds like we still need to look at it. So here's
Can I just bring up one issue about the yeas and nays? It could be, and I just thought about this, but it could be that because there's a 2/3 requirement, if there are abstentions, then then it would have to be 2/3 of the yeas and nays as opposed to by 2/3 vote, because abstentions could sort of throw off the 2/3, if you will. So
Or
that
we
may
could say
be a
2/3,
reason
we
why
could say
this-
2/3 vote of the entire body.
That's what I thought we
Yeah,
were
but
doing.
then that-
That's what I thought it was.
Yeah, but then if there are abstentions, then that's the equivalent of a no. Right?
Yeah.
Just kind of,
And so you won't get
But-
2/3 of people abstain.
Well, but Ed, I mean, I hear your point. I think since you have the opportunity right now, I would suggest that it be simpler, just 2/3 of the council, whatever this commission wants, and not.
The entire body, yeah.
'Cause I
Yeah,
think it gets confusing.
yeah, it's just like, after 15 votes in the House of Representatives to vote to elect a speaker, I think it became evident that abstentions played an important role in reaching
Yeah.
that majority. So that's why the yeas and nays could very well be in there, because of that sort of nuance. But I haven't really thought about it beyond that. But we just need to be mindful of that, I think.
Yeah, I think that I hear your point. I think it probably just easier just to make it 2/3 of the entire council.
And we have that in other places in the document.
Yeah, if you have like someone that's sick and doesn't come in that day, or someone that's away, or whatever, then suddenly that's going to affect the 2/3 vote. So in the House of Representatives, as I recall, with this vote for the speaker, it was 2/3 of the people present and voting. as opposed to people present or not there, for instance. So that we just want to be careful because we don't want to put ourselves in a situation where someone, let's say, passes away inopportunely, and then suddenly you're left with a bigger standard.
So you want to
bigger
have
burden.
2/3 of those present and voting is the common
Yeah.
terminology.
Yeah, I think that probably would take into account the fact that some people may not vote or may not be there, and then you don't want, and then you don't, by a happenstance, increase the burden.
Yeah, what you also don't want is you don't want to have 2/3 of a quorum, for example, if everybody abstentions, the
Yeah.
most abused power that legislative members use. It's used improperly most of the time.
Right.
If you're following your rules, you would know that an abstention has a specific, it's a term of art that people have accepted as, I don't feel like registering my opinion right now, so I'm just going to abstain. No, there's a specific reason for abstaining. It's really up to presiding officers to enforce it. And you want to walk out, but you're not being registered in any way, shape, or form with an abstention if you don't have a reason for abstention. Some of my legislative bodies have been starting to enforce it, but present and voting may address your issue, Ed. I don't know what Tom thinks.
No, I think it does. I
Right.
just think that when we make that type of change, I just think we have to spend a couple minutes to focus on what it might mean.
Yeah. All right, so I'll use present and voting in this section on the 2/3 vote. Good catch, everybody. All right. So we can maybe changing this title right now that I'm highlighting. We may call it, use the other term, the capital projects program. And then this is, this term, capital budget items, is a term, actually, it's one of the sections we actually moved it in here. It's not going to be in the glossary up front because it's really unique to this section of the charter. This was worked on very carefully, I think, with the CFO, but again, I think the group should look at it. The group that's going to look at this should look at it, and we can parse it if necessary in that meeting and come back to the commission with the changes. And yeah.
You're on 10-12 now? You went back to 10-12?
I went back because we were
Yeah.
we kind of went back a moment
Yeah.
ago, and now I was starting to proceed again through.
Okay,
All right, so I just thought I would do that so that everybody was in the same place. So
okay, so on
10-12,
the second line there, again, we have that same issue of the department heads. Well, it says singular, each department head, board and agencies. We're
Yeah.
back to that same issue.
yeah, we will determine whether there's
Yeah.
anybody other than department heads who make
Right,
these proposals. Yeah,
exactly.
I'll fix it. Let me just.
Okay.
go back to this 12. All right. Got it.
and it's also down below in the fourth or fifth line, same thing, the department head.
Tom, you weren't here, I don't think, for the debate, but the issue is whether some other entities other than department heads present budgets. Do certain boards and commissions present their own budgets on the operating side and the capital side? Councilman Camacho thought it was possible that there was a commission or two that might do that.
The
We should
only,
just-
the
yeah.
only, well, that we have, I don't think commission, well, okay, let me rephrase that. There are, the authorities present budgets, but not in requesting funds. But groups like now, I think the Historical Commission does present a budget
Yeah,
request but it's incorporated into the city's
A
operating budget.
department.
Yeah, and the
Yeah.
depart-
Yeah, but the Fair Housing Commission presents a budget,
Mhm.
and the Board of Education presents a budget. They're
Yeah.
a board.
yeah, no, they're not a board, well, that's the question Steve and I were talking about. They're actually a department.
Yeah, they're referred to as a board, so, yeah.
You
but
know,
that's true,
that's
they are.
Ed, that's a really good point that we need to think about because they are a department, but they operated by a board.
Right.
They're
Well, that's why I say department head, including the Board of Education.
Yeah, that's why I keep
Oh,
bringing
that's
it
it.
up. And like the Oak Hills Authority, what do they put in their own budget?
Well, Carl can answer this better than anybody, but they have a budget, but they generally from their own funds, right?
Right, we submit a budget, well, not me, we anymore. They submit a budget to Henry's office. And then we met once a month with the BET.
Well, so then they do.
Yeah.
But you're
Yeah,
not
there's a
asking
budget.
for- you're
But
not asking for money, though.
it's self-funded, but it's a budget, yes.
Is it in the operating budget of the city?
No, it's
No,
not. It's
All right,
something.
so what we have to understand, we're dealing with the operating budget and the capital budget. So we just need to be worried about those entities that are submitting their estimates to Henry, ultimately to the mayor, then the mayor presents to the BET and the council. So the real question is, who is responsible for doing that? I got the impression from talking to Henry that it was departments.
Well, let me
Okay.
just add a little nuance. It used to be, I'm not sure if it's human relations now, but it used to be, who's Lamont? Lamont has a department now. It's a
community
department.
services.
Yeah, community service, right.
Community
So
service.
it used to be that all of those agencies that are now within that umbrella, within the community services umbrella, it used to be that all those departments, all those agencies would submit proposals, and apparently the mayor had $1 million or some sort of amount that they would come to members of the BET, not the BET officially, but members of the BET that the mayor selected to allocate that $1 million among those agencies. Now that those agencies are all within community services, there are no longer agencies that present to the Board of Estimate or its members. And so maybe agencies is no longer a thing as it relates to this process. But
But I'm going to define
but
within within the term department, I will include bureaus, agencies, any other types of entities. And so if they do have an independent authority, they would be considered to be a department per se.
Right.
And I would leave it up to the mayor and the CFO to decide how they want to request this information. The major point is that it's covered by some broad defined term. And that's the objective. So,
Okay. But in 10, 12, we're talking about capital funds. And
yes,
yeah.
oh,
So,
that's true. That's true. That's a good point.
so if the Oak Hills is doing a capital project, do they submit anything to the city?
No, that's entirely self funded.
Okay, well, I don't know if there's any other project that does that or not, but
Yeah, the only reason that they submit to the city is because, at least at this point, the only input that we have, and it's really advisory, just unless it's specifically contractual, which is that when the city loans or forgives a debt to the authority, then the Board of Estimate has some say, or at least there's some conversation as to how that debt's going to be repaid or whether it's going to be waived or something else. But in terms of actual expenditures, the Board of Estimate has nothing to say about what the Oak Hills Authority, for instance, does with its money for capital expenditures.
okay, so we're moving to, do anybody want to discuss this $5,000 limit?
The
Under
5,000
10B.
transfer.
Capital
no, this is the
budget.
this is what we agreed upon at the recommendation of the CFO, that all individual expenditures in excess of $5,000 or an increased amount set forth by ordinance. Again, ordinances are the laws approved by the council and the mayor to be utilized more than one fiscal year. That was his way of defining what a capital budget item is, other than for ordinary operating expenses. Those are capital budget items. And this was the language that Henry had recommended. I assume we will go through this again in the group that will be looking at this. But this
Yes,
was the
I
language.
happen to think it's very low.
It's a low number. He has his reasons, Tom.
No, I
So
know.
think you guys need to work that out.
Yep.
And that's why I had suggested the parenthetical.
No, no, I
because
absolutely, and parenthetical absolutely has to be there.
Yeah, I thought the
Documented.
parenthetical was a prophylactic to get us out of this low number if we need to. But you may want to set it higher. You may, but I thought the parenthetical is absolutely critical with that number.
Okay, so I think it's important that it gets discussed and we know what you really want to do here.
And again, I'm sorry, this is one of those defined terms that was up front and I was mistaken. They're not going into the front of the document. I put them into the front of the capital budget section since they were applicable here. And this is the one, Madam Chair, at your recommendation, and I think everybody's consensus is that we're going to call the capital projects program as opposed to the 5-year program of capital expenditures. It is the 5-year program of capital expenditures, but it will be called the CPP, the capital projects program.
Mhm,
Okay.
mhm.
And then we looked at this a few moments ago. This is the CFO's report with a date recommended by the CFO. And remember this language, by the way, Tom knows this, and I think we made it clear to the commission. All the capital project language is new to the charter, but we're moving the capital projects ordinance into the charter, basically. So we're rejiggering it a little bit to make it the constitutional standard for the capital projects program. Because it's important to lay out that process in the same way that the general fund or the operating fund, the operating budget is laid out as well. So I just wanted to emphasize that. And here's a section I did not change, and I will on the department stuff, which I did not pick up on. I just see it here as we're looking at it. It'll be departments and boards or commissions. However, it's going to be stated, because I want to have it consistent throughout. You see what I'm highlighting?
Oh, I was looking at my own.
In 10-14A,
Okay.
it's heads of all departments as opposed to department heads. And I do have boards and agencies or their representatives. So I will make sure that the common term is used there as it is throughout. All right.
Yep. Okay,
10-14B, I don't think we made any changes there in the last meeting. And again, we didn't make any changes because we didn't. It was decided that the CFO really needed to talk this over with other people. 10-15, we put the POC, the PCO, the plan of conservation and development.
Hey, Steve, just on that point, it talks about the plan of conservation and development pertaining to the physical development of the city. I don't think you need that part of the clause about pertaining to physical
Gotcha.
development.
Gotcha. 10-15. Everybody okay with that? That deletion,
mhm,
Madam Chair?
yes.
Okay,
Any-
good.
Any comments? No, none from the commissioners.
All right. Then we were at the action by the Board of Estimate and Taxation. Talk about the mayor's proposed capital budget. It's kind of a defined term. It's all current, whoops, that's all current ordinance language.
So under 1016C,
Yeah, the such.
no, well, that, but then also the time frame. When would they do that? When could they do that?
I don't know, but I imagine that's an item. I have a note here. Do we want to use? Actually, the CFO recommended repeal of this provision. So I imagine that'll be an item for discussion at the summit meeting. I don't have an answer for you, and my note says the CFO wanted to delete this, repeal this provision.
It seems odd that, because the capital budget is really a separate entity from the operating budget. The capital budget is funded by the issuance of bonds, and the operating budget is funded by
Tax rate.
more or less tax revenues and grants and things like that. So I don't know how we would get. I think it's illegal actually to get monies from a bonding source to use it for operating expenses.
It's not illegal, but it's a very bad practice. A lot of communities do what they call sweeps. And they go through their capital budgets of unexpended funds. And if they have shortfalls in their general fund or operating budget, oh, wow, we can use this money. And they're taking money that taxpayers are going to be paying for years and years and years and get rid of it in 1 year on operating items. It's really not a good practice.
I can see where Henry wants to take that out.
No, absolutely. I agree completely.
But then define where the money is gonna go.
Well, it's bond money, right? So you repay the bond, right? Is that the way it works?
Yeah, or you transfer it for another bond project, another capital project.
Yeah.
Transfer within the capital budget, not out of the capital budget. So you follow whatever transfer procedures you have within capital. If the taxpayers are paying for this over the course of time, you want to put it into an enduring capital project.
Right.
Do we?
So I agree with, I mean, I don't have a vote here. I'm the scrivener, but from a policy perspective, it's not good policy.
Right.
That's in your current ordinance.
But we need to have something that's clear that when there is money left over in a capital account, where it's gonna go and how it can be used in the charter.
I'm taking a look to see if, we get to it, lapsed allotments.
Right.
Later on, it's a lapse, basically, where basically the project's over. So it does address that issue. I don't know what, Tom, I don't know if you were on the council when this was adopted.
No,
No, that predates me.
Yeah, 1968, yes. Although there was an amendment in 2021, Tom.
Tom was about 12 years old at the time.
I was on the council in 68.
68, I actually was 11. I was 11.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
I was 16 in 68.
Yeah,
It was a very good-
the amendment you're talking about, though, was to, wasn't about this section. It was, it was about, it was part of the whole combination of planning and zoning.
All right.
But we really got to pay attention to this and come up with what we do and what is appropriate.
Well,
I think the group's going to look at this is what I've
what we have done
been.
is we've applied it to other projects. If the monies were issued, like if the bonds were funded, basically, we've applied them to other projects. But otherwise, you want to stop the bleeding, and you don't want to keep paying interest on them, on a bond, on monies that you don't
Yeah,
need.
you can't return the money.
No, but I think you can. Yeah, I'm not sure what the
You reallocate the funds to other projects.
Other projects, but
Yeah. But I don't know what the transfers, I don't know what the origin of that was or what the rationale was. And the laws were very different back in 1968 or 68 when these were adopted.
Yeah.
well, I do remember that we used to move a lot of DPW projects, leftover funds to another DPW project that was running over budget.
Yeah.
Bonded projects.
And in the approval of the budget, the standard is a majority present and voting.
Okay, so that's what we've used.
Where's that?
So we may use that
That,
term.
that
That's
is 1016, 1017A.
A. By a vote of a majority of its members.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right. Deadline is the 15th of April. That's interesting, tax day. And if there's something inconsistent with plan of conservation and development, you need a 2/3 vote of the entire again, we should look, Tom, we should look at all of these counts to make sure that we're using consistent language. If Tom's still here, Tom's still there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm just, printer's going in the background. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, or at
This-
least be aware where there's a reason to have it be the entire council as opposed to, President voting.
Oh, absolutely. This is a very critical thing, but again, as you said earlier, Ed, the abstainers could really undermine this. It's like
Yeah.
the budget cap, right? That's coming up.
Right.
If they don't want to do something like that, it could have that kind of impact. So
Yeah,
we'll
I
talk.
could-
Yeah,
I could tell you this one was not, I don't think when it came up, we really weren't worried about this one being a very strict one. It's really, the point is you want all the expenditures to be consistent with the P O C D, and if they're not, you need a super majority.
exactly. I
Yeah,
get
and
it.
that's what this is intended. I mean, the words we can play with the words here.
All right, but I just wanted, yeah.
Yeah.
So we're gonna have to go over this section very carefully at this meeting. And these are just some reporting provisions. And this is where you kind of,
On B, work programs, monthly reports. Is that really done?
the
No,
CFO.
no, and actually, this is one of the issues that I wanted to talk to Henry about, because there's some of these things here I don't think are done.
No, I never heard it being done.
And in the first of each month submitting to the council, that doesn't happen.
No,
And that's why, yeah, that's one of the items to be discussed.
Yeah, that's why this section needs to be looked at. So, and this is where,
this is in the ordinance. Is this section B?
This is in the ordinance, right?
But
that's
it's
correct.
not being done, correct?
Not being done.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay.
You're not following the laws of the community, so.
No.
And then the allotments and lapsed allotments. And again, I think we need to look at that terminology. To see whether that terminology really works, whether allotments is an old fashioned term.
Yeah, you're right.
Then abandonment, what happens when it's abandoned? And then, and this is the section where we were talking about subsection C3 is where it looks like you reallocate the funds, basically. But it's within the capital realm. It's not coming out of capital into operating. It's a reallocation to a different capital project.
Is there a holding place, a general account in the capital budget where they keep rollover funds or lapse funds or whatever you call them?
I think Henry obviously will answer this question more accurately, but I think that you don't want to have money sitting in a bank account. So I think what happens is that when, I'm not sure, but I think that what's done, that the bonds are sold to specifically to pay whatever the project or whatever the bill is or the thing is, or it goes into some sort of account that's not just losing money, because that's kind of a losing proposition. But that's a good question. I think that Henry, that's an answer that I would like to know where that money sits. If it sits anywhere, maybe it's just issued at the time it's spent. At the time it needs to be paid.
Okay, because I just recall through lots of hearings, going through the process of, this was funded 3 years ago. Why have you spent it? Why haven't you spent it? But then the question is, has that money request really been bonded? Or is there, is there a catch-all bonding bond that goes out?
Mine is that the authorization is given 3 years ago, but the actual bonding is needed, is my understanding.
Yeah, maybe we could ask Henry to clarify that.
I think that's, I think that, yes, absolutely. It's one of the reasons we're going to have the meeting, to try to clarify all of this.
Okay. Okay, so we're now on,
Yeah, I think we need to
D.
discuss D. We need to discuss how unencumbered funds work. And various restrictions, so. We didn't do anything on those sections. With, at the last meeting, so all of this will be reviewed by the group. So everybody who's part of that little process needs to read this stuff and make sure we walk through it and understand everything that's in here. And if things are not being enforced and you want them, you put them in your charter, then you're expecting everybody to comply. If they're unenforceable or impracticable, that'll be Henry's argument to make. But you want to make sure that you are able to keep track of these funds. There's accountability and there's public understanding of what's going on. Members of the public can understand how the rules work and how their capital funds are being expended and being transferred or reallocated, so that everybody understands how that all those processes work.
okay, so on 1023, the oversight. Is there an ordinance, Tom, for overseeing the projects?
Are you referring to,
1023.
yeah,
Well,
yes,
there
I mean, there is, I mean, a little bit of history here. No, sorry, this is, one sec. You know, there was an ORAC facilities construction committee, and that was built into the ordinance. And that was used primarily for school building projects. We got rid of that commission, but we do have an ordinance provides that projects over, I think it's $400,000 are overseen by the building, the city's facilities department. So there is an ordinance, it's a long story short.
But should that ordinance be written into
I don't think so, because, I mean, just as,
change it from time to time?
yeah, I mean, just like I said, we had what was the
Yeah.
NFCC, we got rid of it because it got too cumbersome. We
Yeah.
may want to change the dollar amount as things get, time moves on.
Mhm.
So I just think it's easier to have this in an ordinance.
Okay,
we
But it
in
could
our
also-
earlier draft, we had actually included the ordinance provisions in it. And then when we looked at it, I think the conclusion was it's far too heavily codified. You don't want to turn your charter into Stanford's charter, where it's impossible for members of the council to actually, and mayors and council members to actually move with some facility if they need to move in real time to fix something. So something like this, an oversight entity, oversight function should be mandated, but you should be able to do it by ordinance, and the balance of power is between the council and the mayor in terms of how the ordinance is developed.
But it says here the council shall enact an ordinance, so it is mandated. Would it be-
No, we're mandating that they do it,
right,
but we're not mandating the
how they
process.
do it, yeah,
Would
okay.
would it be more more flexible to say the common council may enact an ordinance as opposed to shall, because now suddenly they have to do it, whereas they don't really have to do it if they don't,
Yeah.
wish to.
But isn't it important to have an oversight? And if they may, and they don't, I don't
That-
think that's good.
That's on them,
Yeah.
but
Well, I mean, I mean, we can talk about what we mean by oversight. Because this would be a city project. We're effectively now, we say the city projects are administered by building facilities department. I mean, is that oversight per se? But that's really what it is.
Legislative oversight is, what you want to do is, your current ordinance almost crosses the line into administrative function
Right.
for the
Right.
council.
That's what I think that's what I'm getting at. Yeah.
Yeah, and oversight is a legislative review of what the administrators are doing. So you would have accountability from those people within the administration, from the mayor down to whoever is administering it, to report periodically to the legislative body how this is being done. On the capital side, the council does have considerable flexibility. And but you want to be careful about not becoming an arm of the administration. You are simply overseeing, and the objective is to allocate funds properly the following year, to reallocate during the course of the year, to eliminate programs that are not working, to work with the mayor to restructure departments that are not working outside the capital budget because they're not getting it done. So the term oversight is the right function. You want to make sure implementation, I want to have in here, but it's really an oversight function. It's a true legislative oversight function to bring members of the administration before the body to explain themselves.
Yeah, and I'm actually looking it up.
Yeah, I don't have it in, I have it in an earlier version.
So Steve, as it relates to the charter, this would really then be something that would be in accordance with the current ordinance that's in effect, basically?
Yeah, so I think what you would want to do, Ed, is I think you'd want to look at your current ordinance, the section that we took out of here, and decide, is that what you want to do, or is that overdoing it? But it gives it gives the legislative body the authority. I mean, the mayor could veto an ordinance, but it gives the legislative body the authority, the ability to adopt an ordinance.
Requirement, it's a requirement with the word shall.
No, I get it.
Okay.
The legislative body has to adopt the ordinance, and the ordinance, how they lay out the process is up to them in consultation with the mayor, because the mayor.
Yeah,
has
if I
no
can,
authority.
interrupt for a minute, I'm just looking at it now, and what it says, the ordinance says is the land use committee, I should know this as chair of this, but shall provide project management and oversight of all city capital building projects in excess of 400,000. So yeah, it does provide for the oversight. I just forgot that particular wording.
But project management is an administrative function. That's what concerned me when I saw that ordinance. Yeah. That's really an administrative term, as
Yeah.
opposed to review and
Well,
oversight.
but again, that's in the ordinance, and that's, we can tinker in the ordinance, but.
Yeah, and that's why I took it, that's why we took
Yeah.
it out of the charter. It made it mandatory that you adopt the ordinance.
Right.
It's simply requiring the council, a legislative body, to do what a legislative body should do. And that is oversee the administration. It's a little different on the operating side, because of the structures that you have in Norwalk, but on the capital side, you clearly have oversight responsibilities.
Okay, so are there any other items that should be in this discussion that we haven't covered? Does anybody want to bring anything else up? I don't see any.
And then the last section is the section that was written by,
The referendum.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, not the referendum, the issuance. This was written
Oh.
by our bond counsel.
Okay,
And the controller does play a role in this case, so that's why the controller was left here. But this was written by the Speaker of the House, who happens to be your bond counsel. And the CFO was very comfortable with this language.
anybody else have any comment on it?
No, I just recall that, yeah, Henry was fine with this. Whatever that means, but I mean,
Why do you have M comptroller highlighted, Steve?
I did it because we've been taking the controller out,
Yeah,
and I just was highlighting and say, we actually include this because
we want it.
we want it. So that was my point. So it's that'll come out in the next draft. You won't see that highlight. I just wanted to keep it
Okay.
in there so everybody realized it was not a mistake, because we've been taking the controller out and putting the CFO in all other places. In this particular place, there is a function for the controller. Comptroller.
Okay,
Okay.
yep, so on this section, the next steps are your meeting with the mayor and council and whom else to further the detailed discussion. And when will that be accomplished?
We hope that,
Objective, I'm setting a goal for that to be accomplished.
hopefully, and we were delayed a little bit because some people have been out of town, but hopefully, let's do it this week, next week. I mean, I can't tell you what day next week, but. the
Yeah,
plan-
okay, by the end of January.
Well, no, my hope is that we will have this for our February meeting.
Yeah, that's the goal.
Yeah, the goal is for me to have a revision based on this
Okay, for
this
that.
conclave for the next meeting of the Charter Commission.
I don't have the calendar. It's February.
Is it February 1st or 2nd? Hold on.
February 1st.
Okay.
Yeah, it's February 1st.
Yeah.
February
so
1st.
The end of January. Great. And if we can have that a couple of days ahead of time to review it, that would be helpful.
Well, my goal will have it to you by the end of the week.
Okay,
Yeah, unless this group doesn't meet till like Wednesday or Thursday, my
Yeah.
hope would be to have it to you by the 27th, if that's possible.
okay, thank you. Okay, so is there any other discussion on the budget? If not, we can move on to Article 1, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
Steve? Ed, if you think of anything else, just let us know, so we can, okay, I really
Yeah.
appreciate your input. Thank you so much.
Sure, thank you.
And of course, Tom, always with you. So, Article 1, Steve?
Yep. 1 second, just looking at my Article 1. So what I did here is, you'll see that's a lot more than Articles 1, 2, and 3. I've ended up throwing in Article 6 and Article 9, then Article 11 as well. So there's a big chunk of charter that we have in Article 12, actually, a partial. And then there's a section called recommended for repeal. So what I've tried to do in this section is begin to set up kind of a new structure for your charter with the essential provisions that that should be included in your charter. And Article 1 generally deals with, let me make it bigger for everybody. Hold on. Is it on the screen? You're seeing it on the screen?
Mhm.
Yeah.
We see it.
Whoops.
Oh, that's good. Whatever it is, it's good.
Yeah. All right, let me go back up. So basically, these are the what the document is called, so the public gets to know this is the charter. This is the charter of the city of Norwalk, or the charter. The 1-2 is language. I might look at it a little bit. Again, this is your historic
Excuse me.
language.
I'm sorry, Steve, to interrupt. I have to go to another meeting.
Right.
I'll just catch up with you later. Apologize.
Yep. And I have a lot, and I'll reference your comments, Tom, as I go through them.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
All right, sorry.
Night.
Good night.
And so this is kind of setting the territories. This again is current language. There's some continuance of rights language to make that just shows the historic transfer from the town to the city that I'm leaving in here. The first item that I left in here, and Tom had suggested that I take out, is B, which is the exclusion of town meetings.
Yeah,
You haven't had town meetings in so long. I doubt you need that section any longer. Tom thinks we should simply move that to the discard section, as well as,
and that brings up another point of some here and there, you have the town of Norwalk and the city of Norwalk.
that is correct.
And so where is that difference defined?
right here. I mean, it's the inhabitants of historically the town of Norwalk, which doesn't exist any longer, are declared to be the body politic. It's a historical statement that you moved from the town to the city.
Yeah, so then why throughout the rest of it do we keep using the word town? That's my observation. If
Well,
we're now
I am
just,
suggesting that we take town meetings out.
yeah, I understand that, but I'm talking about the word town.
There are still town officers, like the town clerk, for example, is still considered a town officer. As you'll see when we go through this, based on my conversation with Tom, we have to talk about these other town officers like sheriffs and constables and decide whether we want to keep them. So the reality is you still have some town functions. Among those functions is not a town meeting. So what 1-4A says is that to the extent there are any rights or liabilities that historically remain, they are now the liability of the city. So 1-4A simply recites that anything that was vested or belonging to the town of Norwalk is now owned by the city of
City
Norwalk.
of Norwalk.
Yeah. But Tom has recommended, and I agree with him, that B should come out. We don't do town meetings
Steve,
any longer.
before we get to B though, in A, do we have to keep saying said?
No, I will make those
Okay.
changes. I'll take care of the said language.
Okay,
Yeah, this is my first run on this. I will take care of it. I was trying to pull all the sections in here. This is not a final draft,
okay,
believe me. So I will take care of the seds and other language as well. But there are no town meetings. It makes no sense to include that section in here. So I'm going to move that to, with your permission, I will move that to the discard, the section in the back that you'll see in a few moments or an hour or whenever we get there, recommended for repeal. Let me explain the methodology a little bit. So the way I'm setting it up is if you agree that we should move these to the repeal section, before I give you the next run, I'm going to send this over to the Corporation Counsel's office because I want the Corporation Counsel to look at all the sections that I am recommending and that you've agreed are being recommended for repeal. I want to make sure that we're not taking anything out, that there's either a court case that has defined something that's important to the city, or that he believes or they believe in the Corp Counsel's office is a critical provision that would be helpful. But the town meetings section is one section that I would take out. Tom and I talked about this the other day. The same is true of the next two sections. The C and D, there are no, that the privileges and immunities of all these entities that existed don't any longer need to be mentioned in the charter. The continuance of former district officers, all the officers of all these other entities are long gone. So there's no need to refer to them in the charter. So with your permission, I will move B, C, and D to the repeal section in the back of the document that I'll have the Corporation Counsel look at.
I think that sounds like a great idea. Anybody
Okay.
else?
That's,
fine.
Yeah, remove it.
Okay.
All right, the next,
Can the record show that somebody, Michael just joined us? Or has he been there?
Michael's been here for a while.
I've been here for a while.
Okay, well, the record needs to show that. I didn't see him before. Okay. Okay,
So I've put new language in here. The general grant of powers is the broad assertion that I've put into many charters that talks about what the powers are. One of the reasons we will be able to get rid of a lot is when we get into the mayor's section and the council section, as you will see, that we're going to get rid of a lot of special act provisions. Tens of pages of those sections will go away, is because in 1-5A, we have the general grant of powers. The powers that are within the charter, powers of the special acts, and powers under the state constitution and general statutes. Because we have that general grant of power, you don't need to have all those historic special act provisions that we will be looking at when we get to the powers of the mayor and the powers of the council in Articles 4 and 5.
So
this
is there any reason to say the state of Connecticut rather than just the state?
Because Connecticut is defined, you'll see it's
It's
a defined term. Yeah.
Okay,
And I do notice here that the word town is here, it should be city.
Yeah.
I think I took it from one of my town charters.
It's there several times.
Yeah, I got
And
it.
A also.
Yeah, yeah,
A and A1.
yeah, I got it. I got it.
Okay.
I think I pulled this out of one of my town, as opposed to, I didn't take it from the city of Hartford, but I took it from one of my towns,
Okay,
which is actually a city, but they call themselves a town, but that's another problem. And then B is just the enumeration of powers, doesn't limit the general grant of power, shall be construed as an addition thereto. This is just, again, some general standard powers language that I've used in other communities. The use of the term corporation, for everybody's edification, is the town is a corporation. It's a municipal corporation. It's not a sovereign. It's an artifice of the state, and therefore it's, you know, it's a government. We call it a government, but it's actually something legally that's construed to be a municipal corporation. Tom and I went through these sections, and he felt that most of the stuff in the historical special act provisions, which I left here for some reason, can all go to repeal. That there's nothing, and again, I'll go through these provisions with the Corporation Council, but all of these provisions, like are really covered by the, one of the few exceptions is B, because I want to make sure that that doesn't go away. But for example, condemnation under C is really covered by state law and by constitutional law. Again, D is something that could probably go away, or we may move it to the, I may move it to the taxing district. I think B and D, I'll probably move to the taxing district section of the charter, which we'll see in a few moments.
Yeah, well,
A little later.
you're talking about the school property.
Yeah, yeah. And then E is another section that I will put in the repeal section, subject to conversation with the Corporation Council. But all of these historic provisions are things we can do, and you don't need these provisions to do it. I mean, here's an interesting one. You can establish a business district, building district where it shall be unlawful to construct or remove wooden buildings. That's a zoning function that is covered under Title 8 of the general statutes. Not something that is really done. So I will be recommending that most of 1-6 be moved to repeal. I may move the taxing districts. I will move the taxing district provisions to the taxing district section, and just to make sure that we don't eliminate any powers of the taxing district. So I will move those sections to the taxing district section. I sets up salaries from 1933. That in your charter should be still controlling. The mayor should only be making $2,500 a year.
Did you talk to Harry about that?
Yeah, I'm not sure Harry would be thrilled about that, but that's in your charter right now, so that needs to come out. So most of these
The ordinance, we're gonna frame something that any monetary amount goes into some kind of an ordinance posture. in the future? Yes, no, maybe?
I don't know. Explain
What I
that. to
mean.
me.
Well, that we had talked a couple of times about not having monetary amounts defined in the charter. But that they would be set by ordinance. When a lot of the staff is by, their salaries are by ordinance.
Or by budget, actually.
Well,
I
the
don't think
the council gets a list of the salaries and I think they approve them. I think there's, we need to check on that. There is a,
I think the salaries are dealt with in the budget. Maybe they do executive salaries. I don't know. They
yeah,
don't do
well,
line items, so I don't know that they.
they
Yeah.
used to, so we need to check that, Steve. I
Yeah.
don't know how they
Okay.
do it now.
All right. So that's that section. So that's going to pare down this opening paragraph quite a bit. So I'll show you those changes in the next turnaround of the document.
Okay.
Article 2 are the definitions and titles. Now these, keep in mind that the titles, these are not final by any stretch of the imagination. But here's where you see definition of boards and commissions includes boards, agencies, commissions, authorities, or like entities of the city, whether appointed or elected. That's a pretty standard definition I use. We will see whether or not that needs to be changed at all. We again define charter and city. We define the capital budget in broad terms and capital budget items. So I guess I am moving these things into the section.
On C4, I don't know if we need to reference the 5-year plan there.
Yeah, we'll put the actual definition in here when the definition is agreed upon.
Mhm.
And I don't know what you have in terms of classified civil service or merit system, but if you have something of that nature, I usually define it in this section. So we will, when we get to the departments and we get to those functions, we will define what that term is. That's a term
Okay.
definitely needs to be worked on. Days, we define as calendar days unless otherwise specifically defined. So you don't have to, when you see the word days in the charter, you know that it means calendar days. And this takes into consideration weekends and holidays or days when the city is closed for business. And that deadlines are extended to the close of the next. business
I
day.
want to go up to 5 capital budget items. And I don't know if this is the right place, but when I was reading the litany of what the city can do, they can buy and sell land. And I don't remember seeing that defined anywhere.
Well, this is the definition that was in chapter 10. I just moved it here.
Yeah, but I was trying to find it before, but the reason I bring that up is that, you know, the city has purchased land recently and then
Here it
there's
is.
discussion of, I'm talking about the sale of land, that they also
Oh.
have the power to sell land
Well, why would that be in as a capital budget item?
because it's money coming into the capital budget account.
Does it have?
I'm not sure that the
That's kind of
sale
a
of land.
question. We need
Yeah.
to talk about it, you know, it's.
Yeah, I
an
don't think the
issue.
sale of land would go into a capital budget account. It would
well-
probably go into operating.
Assets are assets. Well, we should ask about that.
All right.
And there are discussions of the potential to do something like that within the city, and I couldn't find that power anywhere identified.
Well, it would probably not be in this.
Section,
Section, but-
this might
yeah.
not be the right section, but it seemed,
It'll probably be under the powers of the mayor, the powers of the council, when we get to that. Here's a general definition of department any major functional or administrative division, including offices, agencies, bureaus, or other descriptions serving such purpose as may be set forth in the budget of the city. It also includes boards or commissions, if they are connected to the department. Again, that doesn't address the issue that we were talking about in the budget section. If there are boards and commissions that submit their own budgets, we should delineate them along with departments.
So Steve, before you roll on, just to go along with what you're saying for clarification from me, since the Board of Education is a department, they report to the elected school board, right?
They report to them for their statutory responsibilities that the Board of Education is responsible for. They also report to the city as a department and have to comply with city regulations and city rules, as long as those rules do not encroach on statutory functions of the Board of Education. So for example, we can't adopt a rule that gives the mayor and the Board of Estimate the ability to change the lines in the budget of the Board of Education. But
Right.
But the city.
I'm just going
can-
back to our last meeting.
Yeah.
When they were saying we have department heads that report into, which is true. But the Board of Education itself is seen as the department head for the education department.
Well, the superintendent is the department head accountable to their board hired by the Board of Education and accountable to the Board of Education. But the Norwalk Public Schools are accountable to the general government, meaning that if the CFO requires all departments to fill out certain forms,
Mhm.
the Board of Ed has to do that. The school system has to do that. They have got to provide all the lines, even though we have no authority to change those lines. Those monies are in the operating funds of the city. And so the city is entitled to know how they are spending that money. We can't tell them how to change it, but we can, the city can look at their historic numbers to be able to make determinations about how honest their budget process has been. If they've come and said, well, we need this bottom line because we need to pay for these widgets and these custodians and those teachers and whatever it may be. And we find
Okay.
that they've been using that argument for the last 5 years, but then you look at their expenditures, and they've never expended a penny on those things, then you know that there may be something out of whack in their
Right.
budget,
So-
and
so-
you can
so-
hold them to account or call them into account.
So in point 10, where it says department head, as this definition says, means an employee, singular, who heads any department in the city. In the case of what we're talking about, that would be a board, an elected Board of Education. That would be the department head, not a single person.
Well, they're not really the department head. They are the governing board of that body.
I
So
thought
this does
Henry
not
said that
include-
they
this does
are,
not include the superintendent of schools. And that's why we specifically say department heads, including the Board of Education, for purposes of submitting budgets. So in that case, in the budget, we are saying that the Board of Education has the same responsibility as a department head, but they are not directly accountable to the mayor. That's why we're not calling them a department head.
okay,
All right.
But you're calling them a department.
They are a department.
Okay.
But
Is
we're,
there-
but
is
but
there
we are
any
calling
other-
them, remember, we're calling them the Norwalk Public Schools,
Yeah,
the Board of Education and the Norwalk Public Schools. Because we use the term after we use departments and department heads.
right.
We say included in these responsibilities are the Board of Ed and the Norwalk Public Schools. So we're not technically putting them in within these definitions.
so they have their own CFO. Who does he report to?
The school superintendent.
Okay,
But the system, the schools, the public school system, and these administrators of that system under their Board of Education are required to comply with administrative requirements of the city. And And so who's accountable? I guess it's the Board of Ed. And the Board of Ed is accountable to the voters of the city of Norwalk. And, you know. but,
Yeah, I think that's true, because I mean, there was a little, dust up last year about the Board of Ed, about the mayor was really in charge of the Board of Education and reported into the mayor, and that's not true.
It's not legally true. The mayor does not have direct supervisory control over the Board of Ed. The mayor, for example, give you an example under the Municipal Employee Relations Act. The mayor is responsible, is the chief negotiator and representative of the city on the general side, the general fund side, operating fund side of the budget. He is not, or she is not, responsible for the collective bargaining of the Board of Education. The Board of Education is responsible for that. They may delegate it to the school superintendent, but they, under the Teacher Negotiation Act, the mayor does not have a role. The council does get to approve pension provisions of the Board of Education contract, but not the monetary provisions for compensation. That's governed by statute, and that stays on the Board of Education side. But the mayor has no role formally in that function.
Okay, Steve, have you found or seen anything in our charter that articulates what basically you've been defining? That defining the role of the Board of Education.
I've never put it in a charter because there's case law that defines that. I mean, we include them in these administrative functions. You'll see when we get to certain functions, when we get to departments, we will include the Norwalk Public Schools in various accountability functions. But it's defined by case law. I mean, we're not gonna, I've never defined it in the charter.
Okay.
Right.
I don't know what we're gonna call the elected officials. We'll figure that out. But I have a catch-all, which includes all of the elective officials in the city. We'll talk about the elective offices in a few minutes, but I'll define that term when we figure out what they are, after we go through the sections. And you'll see there's some things we need to really talk about politically, need to figure out in terms of some people who are actually elected. You'll see, for example, constables. Do we keep the constables? Do we not keep the constables? Do they stay in here? Does the sheriff stay in here? Do you need to have an elected city treasurer? Those are things you'll take a look at a later point. Again, the definition, I keep vacillating whether we're, and again, this is, Madam Chair, we're going to call it the Capital Projects Program. I keep vacillating as to whether this should be at the beginning of the charter, or we should simply have it in the section on the budget. We'll talk about that and figure out a final resting place as we go through this process. Again, these are just placeholders. A final action is a term that I throw into a lot of charters to make it clear when something is finalized, usually an ordinance. To go back to the question about what an ordinance is, you'll see it in a minute. It is the law of the city that is subordinate to the charter, operates under the charter, and operates under the general statutes. It's important for members of the public to know that when an ordinance is passed, that there may be, the mayor has to sign. So when the council approves the ordinance, it's not over. That's not final. When the mayor vetoes it, it's not over until the council has a right to override the veto. It's over when they override the veto, and there may be a 10-day period after that while it gets advertised and all that. It only becomes final at a certain point. Once we get through that process, we will then define what final action is. It means it's the end of the process on how a bill becomes a law. General statutes you'll see throughout the document that the term law is used. When law is used, it means everything. Federal law, state law, ordinances, regulations, etc.
Why are the word ordinance and regulations capitalized and,
Because they're defined terms. You'll see them defined. in here.
okay,
Majority vote of the council, this is a term we'll be working on. It's not man affirmative, it's an affirmative.
yeah, it's, yeah, it's. a
An affirmative
typo.
vote
Yeah,
of at least the majority of the full membership of the council. And I'll talk to the council and see how their comfort level with that definition of what the mayor is. Meeting and public meeting. This is, again, we moved these sections. You saw them in the earlier version of the document. Meeting or hearing notice. Again, these terms, official or public official, I've got to figure out what we're calling them. I want to see as we go into the charter, how the terms are used, and then we'll agree on what is the term that we use to define these folks. I don't know if we're going to have orders or motions. I don't know whether those are terms that are used in your legislative body. When we get to that section, we will see how those terms are used. Those are different than ordinances, which is the next definition, which we'll talk about in a minute. An order could be a legislative action that orders a department to do something, legally mandates that they do something. And a motion is simply an action that's taken by the body, could be like a resolution or not. And I have to just see what your customs are with regard to the legislative body, and we'll figure out whether those definitions are really needed. Just to answer the question about ordinances, this is where it's defined. It establishes the rules and regulations of general municipal application, the violation of which may result in the imposition of a fine or other penalty. It's a law, and under state law has that ability. It's a permanent local law of general applicability, and it accomplishes other objectives permitted by the general statutes as may be enacted in accordance with the provisions of the charter. Again, that's how a bill becomes a law, etc. So that's what an ordinance is, to the question that was raised earlier. It's your laws, local laws.
But
The
is
public-
it's
Yeah.
showing the powers of the city to establish rules. So it's the city, or is it the common council that does the ordinances?
The common council adopts them, but they're city laws. And
Okay.
so, yeah. And they are ordinances of the city. And remember, the common council approves them, but the mayor gets to sign off or veto. Or I'll simply allow them to go into effect. As mayors usually have three choices. When the council adopts anything, the mayor can sign it into law. The mayor can veto it, subject to council override, or the mayor can simply ignore it and have it take effect without the mayor's action.
well, yeah,
Then there's public notice, pretty standard definition that I've used. I'll again run those by the corporation council, make sure make sure that he is comfortable with the actually this needs to come out. I didn't take it out in this section. that
Steve,
was-
can a citizen appear before council and propose an ordinance?
No, the citizen can become, well, I have to look at your procedures, whether you have, how you deal with public comment.
Okay.
But generally, citizens can write to the council and ask the council to consider an ordinance. But the only people who can introduce ordinance proposals formally into the system are members of the body, and you usually allow the mayor to do so. In Hartford, they've now given the authority to the treasurer. The city treasurer in Hartford is a unique, powerful standalone position that has responsibility for all the pension management of the pension funds in the city of Hartford. We have given them, under their new charter, direct authority to introduce an ordinance to the council. But
Is that an
citizens,
elected position there?
it's an elected position, yes.
Okay, yeah, that's a lot of authority.
It's a hell of a lot of authority. I mean, obviously it has to get approvals of the pension commission. They're fiduciaries, there's a lot of liability. They've had a history in the last 8 years of having professional financial people who've been elected treasurer. Historically, they've had political people, but they've got a very, very highly trained professional staff in that office, and they do a pretty good job, but they're unique. Most treasurers are check signers. They don't play much of a role. Most of the elected treasurers are what I call sinecures, political jobs. Some they get paid $5,000 a year, and their facsimile of their signature goes on the checks.
Yeah.
And they don't play much more of a role than that.
The council has an ordinance committee also.
Yeah. Yep, that's how they organize. Regulation is a lesser version of an ordinance. I'll talk to City Hall about whether they utilize regulations, and they're generally the actions of boards or commissions as opposed to the council. The council passes the laws, and under the laws, under the ordinances, a board or commission may adopt a regulation pursuant to a provision of the ordinance. And that regulation is considered part of the laws of the community, but it's not, doesn't have the same force as an ordinance. And so I've used this in communities that have regulatory functions and take their functions seriously. I don't know whether or not it's something that you really use in Norwalk. We'll see when we get to the board and commission section. And if the court counsel says to me, or the mayor says to me, council leadership says to me that we really don't use it, then it's a definition that'll go away. I just wanted to include it in the overall definitions, at least initially, to decide whether or not it's a function that you use, or a function that, if you don't use it, a function that you think would be useful. And that's the reason I do it. Resolution, again, is another action of the council. I've used the definitions because resolutions mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And I try to lay it out in the 4 different ways they're used. When I was an alderman, I would do a resolution congratulating an 8th grader for getting straight A's in school. That is a sentiment. What a nice kid, what a great kid. The kid deserves to have a piece of parchment commemorating that activity. You could do a resolution that governs the business of the council. Your rules could be adopted by resolution, something like that. Again, a recognition of by the council. You could, we've done resolutions over the years. I've seen resolutions that are, I sponsored a resolution creating Bishop Tutu Corner in New Haven back in the 1980s in honor of Bishop Tutu for the role that Bishop Tutu played. And it's kind of a recognition of that function. I think we did a resolution calling the New Haven port a free port for Nicaraguan ships when Ronald Reagan was cutting off trade with Nicaragua. So you use resolutions in frivolous ways and serious ways as a legislative function. The final resolution is more serious. It's a resolution that complies with a specific requirement of statutes. A lot of general statutes require legislative councils, city councils, common councils to approve certain statutory responsibilities by resolution. It doesn't make sense to me because they're more like adopting ordinances. And we say that, so it's defined there because in some communities, I've actually used the term statutory resolution because we treat a statutory resolution the same way you do an ordinance, because it is a serious use of legislative authority, because you're doing it to access funds, access grant money, do other things that are required. It's sometimes used to actually create authorities, the way the statutes are written. I think it's absurd to create an authority by resolution as opposed to ordinance, but we don't tell the state how to use the language. They tell us. So I've used it in the term, I've defined it in the term resolution to make sure we're covered. We know what special acts are and special laws. A lot of our charter comes from that. And state or Connecticut means the state of Connecticut. So those terms may be used interchangeably in the document. State constitution means the Constitution of the state of Connecticut. And then vacancy is a term that is used. When we get to the vacancy sections, you'll see how that's used. It's basically, it means that somebody's left office or can complete the term or is actually left the office at the end of their term, and you have a vacancy in office. This is a term that defines how the word shall is used, and we want to make it clear because the courts have kind of changed their parlance. Sometimes shall doesn't really mean shall, but under this charter, when we use the term shall, to avoid any doubt, you need to say it's equivalent to must. You must do this. So it is really a mandatory term. It is imposes clarity in the sense that there's an obligation to do something when we use the term shall. In this charter, there should be no doubt that it means you must do it, as opposed to you have some discretion to do it. So those are the definitions. Again, those are all placeholders. We'll be looking at those throughout the process, and we'll be making adjustments throughout the process. Everybody okay? How are we doing, Madam Chair, for time? We're at 8:40.
Well, I was just going to check with the commissioners. We have quite a few pages left here.
Oh, it's a big piece of work.
Yeah.
Do we want to finish two?
Finish two,
Two only
section
goes,
two.
two's only a couple more subsections, and then three, I don't know, three,
Okay.
maybe we wait to get to that as separate.
And so while I was thinking about that, I was thinking also in terms of creating a calendar here. We have 4 months left and figuring out how we're going to get the different sections done here. So is everybody okay with moving on for finish off this section?
Yeah, this is page 12 of 39.
Right,
Yeah. finish that.
okay, all right.
All right. So the standards of conduct, this is a section that I've been using, that I've developed for in the last few years, that basically you have an ethics ordinance in your city, but this mandates that you have an ethics ordinance. You don't have to have an ethics ordinance under the current rules. In most of the communities that I've been dealing with, they think it's a really important function to mandate standards of conduct. Because public office is a public trust. This lays it out, and you'll see this terminology used throughout the document. When we get to boards and commissions at some point, I've defined sections that really lay out to the public that when you're on a board or commission, you're not there as the mayor's representative. The mayor may appoint you, the council may approve you. But once you are in that office, once you are on that commission, it's your job to recognize you have a function that and responsibility to the public that you serve, as opposed to the political people who've appointed you to those entities. Likewise, this kind of says it up front that the process needs to be fair, free from threats, favoritism, nepotism, undue influence. It kind of lays out a constitutional standard, and then it requires the ethics ordinance. You already have an ethics ordinance. They may have to look at the ethics ordinance to see if there's anything in here that would expand their ethics ordinance, but it's basically mandates, again, the term shall have a code of ethics by ordinance, and requires review and comment by the Board of Ethics in that process, so you include them in there. It does lay out recusal responsibilities, and it talks about the violations and the consequences of violations as well. And it points out that public officials are are obligated to follow the law pertaining to conflicts of interest and lays out general broad consequences that could occur, including discipline, disqualification, and ultimately removal as well.
Patsy, do you know right now how many people are on the Board of Ethics in the city? How
I
big
do
is
not.
that board?
No,
I
no, I
don't know.
don't.
I do
No,
not.
I don't. And the one question I had when I read this section is, who keeps these records? Who's responsible
Yeah,
for keeping these records?
and I asked the
It's got
number
the
because I
town-
think,
It's got the town clerk up there.
okay,
And that doesn't make sense, but, yes, I don't,
What records?
under,
I think it's under anything that somebody brings up,
I didn't see it
complaint.
at all. That's what I'm saying. Who keeps track of this?
yeah, I don't, that's a good question.
Keeps track of what?
Complaints brought before the board.
Compliance.
Of the ethics board itself, or whoever the administrators are for the ethics board
Yeah.
would be
no,
responsible
so-
for
so-
administering.
So that's why I ask about, I'm not sure what the numerical number is of members. But, and I don't think it's in here, maybe it doesn't belong here.
Well, we'll get to that. We'll see whether the
Well,
ethics
but-
board,
so-
yeah.
well, So just put this in the back of your mind.
Hmm.
The reason I ask that is that in something like this, that has this much teeth. And really deals with ethics of people working for the citizens of the city. It should be a number that could be equally represented by said parties in the city. All the boards aren't like that.
Yeah.
When we get to board, well, keep it in mind, when we get to boards and commissions, those are the issues that we need to address.
Okay,
If the Board of Ethics is not established by charter, my strong recommendation is that you do establish it by charter. You make sure you have a complement of members that is sufficient to operate it.
mhm,
And in some communities, we mandate that they have a budget that you cannot reduce. Give you an example. In the city of Waterbury, when they were coming out of their financial problems at the beginning of the 21st century, we created a financial audit and review commission. And the
mhm.
idea of this commission, the FARC, we called it, was that you needed to have an independent audit about capacity. Mayor appoints, council approves, the aldermen approve, but the audit department is under the jurisdiction of that commission. And neither the Board of Aldermen or the mayor can reduce the budget of that entity from the prior year. Now, they could freeze them out and not increase them for 10 years. And it's kind of hard to mandate increases, but as a rule, they'll get their increases like other departments do. But if a mayor is worried that they're going to audit the mayor can't eliminate their budget or reduce their budget, below what the most recent fiscal year budget was for that particular department. And so I consider an ethics commission to be one of the essential critical bodies that should be laid out in the charter. You'll hear me say that I don't think most boards and commissions need to be. I don't think most departments need to be, but I think the essential ones do. You want to make sure procurement, on the department side. We'll talk about those later, but that's
Yeah, I agree
that's
with
when
you.
we'll tackle.
Thank
That's when
you.
we'll tackle that issue.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that'll be a big one.
I know that some of the districts, the taxing districts, do have, actually, I'm chairman of one of them, so.
You're absolutely right, Madam Chair. As I was going through this, I was looking for ethics in the body of the charter and I don't see it.
Yeah,
But you see it in almost every taxing district has an ethics commission.
right.
Yeah, it's a good model. Unfortunately, it's not in the city side, which is interesting. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So the next section is rules of order and civility. I have it's in the wrong place actually, but the comment that's attached to this section 1-21H of the I'm sorry, 1-232 of the general statutes is a section of the general statutes that talks about conduct of meetings. And so under FOI, there's considerable statutory language that really talks about the removal of people. You remember, freedom of information is designed to include people, to include people at meetings, to make sure they get information, they have access to information. Cities have to provide information. When we get to those sections, you'll see there will be considerable posting requirements. People are entitled to information. But the law also recognizes that there's a need for order and civility in those meetings. And so I've been drafting for my communities rules of order and civility to lay out and say that, you know, the workplace needs to be, and it's not town operations, it'll be city operations. I'll fix that. That there needs to be a sense of safety for the people who work for the city. That people who come to City Hall need to be treated civilly and fairly as well. They need to treat public employees that way. When you come to public meetings, there needs to be decorum. Everybody's rights need to be protected. There needs to be tolerance. Actually, former Governor Rell has played a very big role in civility in her post-governorship. She has a Civility Institute that's doing some really, really great work. And so the objective here is to really set a sense of order, and you don't do Robert's rules, you use Mason's rules. Tom and I have talked about that, so I made those changes as well. But you want to make sure that everybody understands there's a parliamentary order and there's parliamentary authority for running meetings. You want to make sure that the council and every board and commission, and Madam Chair, I will fix and make sure it says Common Council, that everybody does in fact have rules. They should be reviewed by the Corporation Council to make sure that they're fair. They should be adopted by, well, I had 2/3. Tom thinks it should be a majority, but we can talk about that at some point. We make it clear that presiding officers of elected bodies like the council and appointed bodies like boards and commissions are responsible for maintaining the order of meetings. So there's no doubt the charter makes it clear that the presiding officer is responsible for that. That people who attend meetings, including members of boards and commissions, need to follow those rules, and that the breach of rule could lead to, under the statute, which is permitted under the Freedom of Information statute, that could eliminate or require the removal of a person from a meeting. I had the term sergeant at arms. I'm told that we don't have sergeant at arms,
Yeah.
so it would be a law enforcement officer who would be responsible for. You don't want. I don't think Patsy wants to be the person responsible for throwing somebody out of the meeting, but Patsy can call a police officer into the meeting to have somebody removed from a meeting if that person is really disorderly and really shutting down the operation of the board or commission. So it establishes that broad standard.
I thought this was excellent,
Thank
really
you.
helpful.
Yeah,
and-
thank you. I'm glad you say that. It's most people think it's really, really good language. I'm really very pleased with the way it's come out in a couple of the communities I worked in, and we'll look at it and clean it up to make it work better for Norwalk. And then the last provisions here, there's one more after this, are the open meeting and public record requirements.
Yeah.
Again, these are just stating the obvious, but the public needs to see it. The public doesn't know all the general laws that apply. These
Right.
sections tell the public, you're entitled to records. Records have to be kept. You're entitled to records. You're entitled to meeting minutes, recordings of meetings, to listen to these things, and that they should be available at the office of, I guess it'll be the town clerk, as opposed to the city clerk.
No, most of them would be with the city.
All right, then I'm right. And then we'll leave it with the city clerk. And then again, and it's not the RTM. I took this from one of my small towns, that the records of all public bodies, this will be the common council and all bodies, boards and commissions are open to the public. But again, I point out here that they do have a right to go into executive session as long as they do it in accordance with state law. But the public, a lot of members of the public will wonder why a board is going into executive session. Why can't I be in there? And there are statutory reasons why those meetings could occur. I think it's important to just flag that in your charter so that members of the public understand that this won't be a mystery. It's in our charter. Anybody who reads the charter should be able to figure that out. Or you could point to the charter when you go into a session that, it's permitted. The last section.
Wait a minute, in this section, I didn't happen to see whether there could be any fee charged, and that can become a problem. I mean, when you go to the town clerk and you want to get a document.
They're permitted under state law to do that.
But I didn't see any articulation of it in this section, so could we just tag it and
I'll
see?
make a note.
Yeah.
Yeah, reasonable
Um,
fees permitted by law.
Yeah,
Got it.
I think they charge though, like what, 50 cents a page?
what, Michael?
I think in the town clerk's office, I think they usually charge you like 50 cents a page.
Well, oh, yeah, well, that's for copyings, but then if you want a map or, a deed or whatever, there are different fees.
Yes, yes, they are.
Yeah,
There may be, let me just take a quick look. I have addressed the issue in different things, but let me just see here.
I just didn't happen to see it, and
It
I
may
know.
be. It
That-
may be. No, no, I did not put it in here. The other place where you could put it is in the town clerk's office. In the city clerk's office, but yeah, I'll make sure there's a reference to it, Madam Chair. Absolutely. And again, it's not the RTM, it's the council. I apologize. When I'm pulling things together sometimes, in the first run, I forget where I'm taking it from and where I'm going. My towns get very offended when I put city provisions in, and I say, it'll be fixed, don't worry about it, we'll take care of it.
well, in Norwalk, it's a challenge because half
Yeah, I got it,
people say, call us town of Norwalk and others.
I got it. Well, New Haven's the same way. It's the city and town of New Haven, city and town of Bridgeport, city and town of Hartford. Every city still has some town functions, and that's why you still hear references to their town functions. We're not going to deal with that tonight. When we get into Article 3, we'll talk about that. And this last section, and again, this will be repeated when we get to boards and commissions. And the reason I have these sections, I've moved these sections into this front portion of the charter because it kind of lays out, the culture. We have a culture where we want to deal with conflicts of interest and ethics. We have a culture where we want to have civility and order in our meetings. We have a culture.
Transparency and
Exactly right. A culture of openness and access to public records, and a culture where we're going to have diversity of neighborhoods, of races, of different types of people on our boards and commissions. And it just lays it out. We'll deal with it more when we get to the section, but it's pretty robust. It mentions most of the protected classes. And we want to make sure that there is broad geographic representation so that you don't have, I know cities in the state of Connecticut that just have people from middle-class neighborhoods on their boards and commissions. No one from the inner city, nobody from a poor part of town or another part of town. It's just people who are tied into the political structure. And so these sections are designed to lay out that mayors and councils better be careful and in terms of making sure that they're appointing broad diversity on their boards and commissions. So that's Articles 1 and 2.
Here.
Okay,
All right. And so let me just say this too. Tom and I've gone over this. I have his comments. I've heard nothing from the mayor's office yet. I will try to get their comments so that our next meeting, I will hopefully have a markup of some of the comments that are coming from those parties. But let me just give you a preview quickly, and then we'll move on. But as I told you, Article 3 is where we get into the elections and who our officials are, et cetera. And and that kind of stuff. And we have to, here's where we're gonna have to make some decisions on C and D, on who are the elected officials. We know we have the mayor, we have the council, We have the Board of Education spelled incorrectly. And we have a treasurer and a city sheriff are on the city side. Then we have the town officers, selectmen. Do we need selectmen? Constables. Do we need constables? The town clerk, of course, we need Rick. And everybody knows that. So you need the town clerk. What I'm looking at is the possibility of consolidate. If we eliminate some of the officers and you need to decide, working with the other officials in town, is it politically problematic? I don't know. In one of my towns, moving the constables from elected to appointed officials was a big brouhaha, which was astonishing to me. But that's not my decision to make. It's my question to raise with you. We'll get to that. The terms of officer here, you'll see the districts are laid out here, the 5 council districts, the issue of reapportionment, at large, the Board of Education, the at-large Board of Education. Remember, the at-large, the Board of Education is elected by district. In your charter, minority party representation appears to be applicable to your Board of Education, not to your council, but I'm not sure it's ever been used. And then we have vacancy language, which I've not really worked on, except I've used the language we have here, expenses, etc. Then Article 4 are sections that were in some of the earlier provisions. This is where we lay out the town clerk. I'm just doing it real quickly just to give you a sense. The registrar of voters, the establishment of, the establishment of precincts and polling places. We'll talk about that when we get to it. We want to have the registrar come in, the constables, the sheriff, the selectmen. And then, and we can talk about this from the scheduling point of view, because we had some conversation about bringing the Board of Education in here. I don't, Madam Chair, I don't know if we'll be ready for the next meeting for them, but maybe we will. We may want to wait until we get the comments back on the budget, so that we
I
can give them.
think, yes,
Yeah.
I think we do,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah,
I would
If
agree
If
with
you
that.
take this outline and just give us, a timeline goals of,
yeah, we'll go, I'll pull the schedule up in a minute. And then I did the Board of Education section because I thought if we were meeting with them, why not pull it all together? And some of this stuff was in the document already, but I've just actually created the section on the Board of Ed so that when they come in, we could give them this to look at before they come. Then historical provisions. These are the council districts as they exist today. 11-1 will be the council districts, District A, B, C, D, and E. And at some point when they do redistricting, these are going to go away. But for the present time, instead of having them in the front of the document as part of the body of the document, they will be referenced from section 3.4A to 11-1. That's where they'll be held until there's redistricting and they go away. After redistricting, they will be in the ordinances. You'll see the districts in the ordinances. And then just quickly, taxing districts. I've moved a number of things that were in the early portions of the charter into the taxing district article, which will be Article 12, which lays out the 6 districts, the district officers. These were all in what would have been Article 3. And so they're at the beginning of the tax district section. The whole section is not here because it's in the body. And then I told you about repeal. I'm recommending for repeal some of these things like the wards, because no one seems to know what the wards are. Language on lists of voters. I have substitute language in the body of the document, and most of this is governed by state law anyhow. And I'm going to run these by the Corp Council, and that's it. So that's kind of the run through on what else is in there. So please read it. I will probably give you a corrected update based on my conversations with Tom, and I hope to get comments from the mayor's office on these sections to give you for our next meeting.
So Stephen, is a ward in a district the same thing, or is a ward within a district?
It's not clear.
That's-
the ward is the voting area.
And then you have precincts also.
Yeah,
Well, we have voting locations. Are you defining that as a precinct?
No, I'm telling you, I don't know what you have, Patsy. what I know is the terms that are in the charter. In the
Yeah.
charter, you have precincts, wards, and council districts.
Okay,
And
Yeah,
I
and
know,
then some-
and I understand what you're saying, because I understand what a voting district is. So we need to meet with the registrar. Do you do these things?
Yeah.
Are there precincts? Are there wards? Or do you simply call them voting districts? And do the voting districts, are they identical to the council districts? Maybe yes, maybe no, I don't know. But we need to get our terminology. We need to
Yes.
reverse engineer to put into the charter what we actually do.
Yeah,
Because
because there's some people, depending on if it's a federal or a municipal election, you vote one place, if it's a federal election, you vote another place.
Yeah.
if it's a state election also, state and we have, we follow the district with the state and federal.
Mhm,
Local is by ward.
mhm.
so if you want to move on
Sorry.
to the next, you want to talk about schedule, Madam Chair?
I'd like you to just prepare something and send it to us.
Okay,
'Cause you know, you've got to break it down into a logical
Yeah.
component of what is reasonable to cover in any one area. You can best determine that and
yeah,
send it to us.
I'll
okay?
show you quickly what I've got. Hold on. I'll put it up on the screen.
So,
see it?
while you're doing that, Steve, these dates that are on the left-hand column, are these dates that these are to be discussed, or are these dates that these items within that block? should be
No, we're still,
completed by?
we're still gonna figure all that out. I mean, like, for
Okay.
example, today we had a discussion on Articles 1 and 2. We didn't get to 3. I gave you a brief overview. We had a continued discussion on budget and finance issues. For February 1st, and I'll talk to Patsy about this. Before I send it out to you, I will run through the schedule with Patsy, with the chair, and make sure that she's comfortable with what we're doing. I have some loose configurations. These things are going to move out. As you can see, I have a lot of time in April where we haven't done these things. And if you see April, action items. So we're going to have a lot of discussions in the next few weeks. As I am drafting these sections, you're going to see them, and we're going to have to start rolling through them and coming to a conclusion. We're getting there with the budget. Keep in mind, the budget's going on for 4 weeks now, 5
Yeah.
weeks.
Right,
So we're going to have to figure out
and we're
ways-
not done.
you know, ways to make it work better. My hope is that between February and March, I will be introducing sections on the council, sections on the mayor, then we'll deal with the boards and commissions and departments. Those are the big four that I haven't got to. I'm very pleased that I was able to knock out the Articles 1, 3, 1, 2, 3, 6, 9, and 11.
Mhm.
Because there's a lot of stuff in there. But what we're going to have to figure out on, what I will do is I will go through the powers that exist for the mayor and the council, and you will see a very substantially reduced number of pages for both of those functions, because you don't need all the special act things. So you'll see that that'll be easier than it looks, than it feels. But again, we have to make sure that we don't take anything away from either of those bodies. Then when we get to boards and commissions, we'll have to make some decisions about that. But I will sit down. But for the next meeting, Madam Chair, should we say that we're going to again discuss these articles and the budget items as well?
Yeah, try to, yeah, and then you've got Joe DeLong.
That was a recommendation that I was thinking about asking Joe to come. I'm not sure we need him. I love Joe. I was on the phone with him today. He's one of my dearest friends. If you think it would be inspirational to have the director of CCM come in, I'm happy to, and Joe's more than happy to come. We're in a roll up your sleeve mode right now.
That's
Yeah,
where
so
I am.
that's why I said not yet invited. Joe's more than happy to come out. I'm not sure that's really critical at this moment. I think we're in work mode.
I would agree.
We
I
need to
would
roll up
agree.
our sleeves and get some of this
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
Okay,
I
And
don't
so
think
I
we're ready
will-
for speakers.
I will
everybody's
try-
shaking their head in agreement. Yeah,
it's gone. It's gone. You see, it's gone.
okay.
And what we need to do. what I hope-
Instant gratification. I've always wanted that all my life.
There you go. Yeah,
Now I
Yeah.
got it.
yeah. So there you go. Done. out of there. So I'll lay it out and try to do it in a systematic way so that between now and the end of March, we will have all of our sections out. And then
Okay.
April and May will be about refining the sections, negotiating the sections with the mayor and the council leadership, to make sure we come up with a document that is readable and a document that is acceptable politically to everybody that we have to play with.
Okay.
So we'll do it.
Okay, great.
All right.
Okay, we're looking forward to it. So
I just
a
have one
motion
question.
to
So
adjourn is in order unless somebody has something of
I
substance.
have one question that deals with the
Yeah.
timeline
Carl?
that kind of goes along with what I think Patsy's asking. Is it possible for us to see what the work is ahead to completion? And be able to block it out in a timeline that says by X date, these items will be taken care of. By X date, these items will be taken care of. And so that we can look forward and say, okay, we really want this done in May, but while we're laying this out in a timeline, this is not going to be done by May. Maybe we have to add another month, or maybe we
Well, we don't have.
shorten it, or maybe we add extra meetings. Yep, that's
Yeah,
all. I'm saying.
yeah, what we're gonna find, what I will do, Carl, Commissioner, I will lay it out.
Okay,
And it's, again, it's going to be, kind of a hopeful, hopeful thing, and I'm gonna try to lay it out so that by the end of April, we will have,
Optimistic.
yeah, it's an optimistic, I will lay out the optimistic schedule, and the realistic schedule for me to draft these things. I have never had to draft from scratch, basically. And I'm doing it from scratch, but I want to make sure I am not missing anything that is a critical part of your government. And so it's a very careful process. I am going to sit down next week. I'm going to try to work next week on the mayor and the council. I want to try to jump on those as soon as I can. So I will lay it out. I'll talk to Patsy probably early next week because I'm traveling on Friday. I'll try to talk to her early next week and give her my proposed layout of the schedule. And then in April and May, we may have to be looking at some extra days. Okay?
Yep.
sure. Yep,
Okay.
no,
right,
nothing's meant as a
Adjourn.
criticism. Kudos.
I
Doing a good
second.
Oh,
job.
I didn't view it as criticism. Thank you.
All those in favor of adjourning this?
Aye.
We are adjourned
Thank
Aye.
you, Steve.
Have a good night.
at quarter
Okay.
after 9.
Talk to you guys soon.